Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's topic, building a generative AI chatbot and finding the right approach for you. Today's topic is one that's been very much driven by questions that we get asked as a consultancy. Over the last year, the subject of AI is proliferated and it's sort of top of mind for many of the clients that we work with. And it's something that's come up time and time again around not so much that people have specific use cases for, but it's more around it's a subject that is being discussed internally within companies, but we're not sure how as an organization to approach it. What does it mean in terms of sort of practical applications? And today's topic is very much driven by those questions and around some of the examples of practical use cases. So today we're going to delve into how AI can be applied to the traditional chatbot. So I'm Mario Kiriakou. I'm one of the co-founders here at Ratio, and I'm pleased to introduce my colleague who'll be running us through today's topic, Steve Rentschel, and a little bit about Ratio. I won't dwell too much about us because I know we're here to learn about GenAI and chatbots. But just a quick overview of Ratio, especially if you're not familiar with us. There's a few people, new faces on today's call. Ratio are a optimization experience consultancy. We work with a range of businesses across different sectors, travel, financial services, etc. And we focus predominantly around MarTech and data and utilizing data and technology to deliver a really good joined up customer experience for you and your customers that generates results. We run webinars and events regularly. We post a lot around not just AI, but also around data, CRO optimization, and we would love for everyone on today's call to sort of be within our community and learn about our sort of next upcoming events. So feel free to follow us on LinkedIn. You can take a quick, if you open up your camera on your phone, it'll take you to LinkedIn where you can follow us, and we post, all of the upcoming activities that we have on the go. Cool. I'll hand over to my colleague, Steve, to run us through today's presentation.
Thank you very much, Mario. Hi, everybody. So today we are looking at GenAI chatbots. And I was speaking to Mario earlier, and I said to him, the way I've positioned this really is things that I wish I'd known 3-4 years ago. We've done an awful lot of work, researching tools, looking at how these things can be best implemented. And there's a whole raft of considerations to be thinking about when you're looking at developing a chatbot. So it's almost like AI chatbot for dummies, but forgive the reference, but it's really supposed to be an intro to, if you're looking to deliver your first chatbot, then these are the steps you should be thinking about going through. So today we're covering a range of topics around that context. Firstly, what do we mean by GenAI, and some cautionary words about the maturity of the technology at the moment. Chatbot landscape right now. So what are the kind of tools out there? There's obviously an awful lot of investment and startups and new players proliferating on the scene at the moment. So we'll just touch briefly on what those are and what capabilities they could possibly give you and how you could potentially use them. Then we'll look at how you decide which approach is right for you. And that'll be based on a variety of factors like cost, time, budget, integration capability, and so on. And then planning your first phase rollout. When we originally promoted this, I was going to do a live demo of an Azure OpenAI chatbot. But as I was going through and writing this, I thought, well, it doesn't really add anything. Most people know what a chatbot interface looks like. And the time's probably better spent telling you how to get it up and running. So I focused on that today for this session. So first of all, what do we mean by generative AI? So this is from Merriam-Webster. Their definition of it is artificial intelligence that is capable of generating new content in response to a submitted prompt by learning from a large reference database of examples. So some people will know GenAI as something that creates content, or ChatGPT, or a whole raft of other potential use cases. We're going to be focusing today on how AI generates responses primarily in a customer-facing chatbot scenario, although a lot of the principles apply for internal-facing applications as well. But that's really the focus of today's session, is how GenAI enables that chatbot scenario. Just quickly to look at why businesses are investing in this, based on our own experience and the conversations that we have. There's a few reasons, but primarily trying to reduce support overheads, so the number of customer support queries that are coming in, but also trying to pre-qualify leads a bit better as well. We work with some brands that sell quite high value products, and a lot of the leads they get through are not particularly well qualified. So it's a mechanism by which they can have an initial automated conversation before they hand off to a real person. Second one is to simply guide users. So at different points in the journey on the website or through an app or whatever, there will be moments where people are frustrated, they don't know what to do next, they've got questions. And obviously we live in a society now where a lot of people don't want to pick up the phone. So it's providing a mechanism to try and guide people through our sales funnel or our customer journey. The third one is that as a company is starting to serve volumes of customers, that's quite expensive to do at scale with people. But also it's quite difficult to set the brand tone and the way in which you want to deal with those customers. And what AI allows you to do is to create a bot that will mirror your brand tone of voice. It'll control the experience that the user's going through, through a series of either predefined rules, conversation types, or through data sets that you provide it with. So the idea being that you can provide the same experience online as you do offline. And it often falls across the whole journey. So it could be someone who's looking to purchase, it's someone who's in the middle of purchasing, or it could be someone who's already purchased and we want to provide them with some sort of post-sale support. And obviously this is not an exhaustive list, there's other reasons as well, but these are the ones we come across most. But, and this is the cautionary tale really, GenAI is still far from perfect. You've probably seen the stories out there, and I'll come on to guardrails a bit later on in terms of how you control what is being presented through your app. This is something that came out in the news last year, someone who'd managed to, if you like, game the DBD chatbot, so the delivery service. They'd gone through and they'd started doing prompts, and the problem with this is that the bot itself was using a ChatGPT type model that wasn't particularly well trained and didn't have the right guardrails. And so in the end, this person asked them to write a poem about how bad DPD is. And as you can see, it delivered. And it came back with this, and the guy posted it online and it went viral, and DPD deactivated, I think that's probably the same day. So there's a lot of problems when you let this loose. And there's the old phrase, AI is only as good as the data that you give it, but it's also only as good as the guardrails that you put around it as well. And it's still nascent technology. It's not quite there yet. And if you get into the world of AI chatbots, you'll start hearing phrases, one of which is hallucinations, which is probably self-explanatory, but hallucinations is really where an AI bot is giving you an incorrect response because it doesn't understand. It's looking at different reference sources, but it can't contextualize that. It can't tell what's right and what's wrong necessarily. It makes assumptions. And I know we've got quite a few people from the legal sector on the call today. So I picked out just an example from Stanford University. They did some research, I believe this came out beginning of last year, and they were looking at querying things like case law to try and see what response the bot would give based on different legal scenarios. And they found that in at least 1 out of 6 scenarios, the bot actually came back with incorrect information. And they went on to say that the biggest problems with AI reliability at the moment is it can't really deal with facts. It can deal with data, but it can't really deal with facts. It can't perform complex reasoning, and it can't explain how it's come to the conclusion that it's come to. It's literally pointing at data, reading it, and coming back and trying to make a best guess as to what the answer is. So this whole hallucination problem, again, is one of the reasons why guardrails and control over data is quite important, especially if you're in a highly regulated or compliance driven business, but also if you want to just provide the best experience for your customer. So I'll just take you quickly through the AI chatbot landscape. Again, there's hundreds of companies doing this now, if not thousands. But some of the names you've probably seen Azure OpenAI, the OpenAI ChatGPT application, MS Copilot, Studio, of which can be used to create chatbots. So those, if you like, your sort of bread and butter chat applications. But then there's a whole raft of companies that have built services on top of that. So Druid being a company that we've dealt with previously, IBM Watson, LivePerson you'll have heard of. You'll often see their chatbots on a myriad of websites. And then you've got more internal facing applications. So Claude for more internal facing assistant type AI assistants, Jasper for content creation, supporting marketers. And there's also people who built their own, and that's probably not a direction I'd recommend unless you happen to have extensive experience in a team that's got things like Python and those kind of technology skills. So these are the kind of, if you like, different levels of applications that are available. And like I said, there's loads more that I'm not going to have time to talk about. But what I do want to do is talk about how these work. So if you like, but under the hood, how these applications are serving content back to users. So this is a diagram. I actually stole this from Bot Penguin, who I've referenced at the top left there. And I thought it was a really nice, simple way to illustrate how the flow functions. So as a user, they want to communicate with you through different channels. So, I mean, the website's an obvious one, but also they go through WhatsApp, Telegram. If you're more of a sort of consumer-facing organization, potentially Facebook Messenger, Instagram, those sorts of things. It doesn't really matter because the underlying chatbot can potentially serve all these channels. So they're coming to you, they're initiating a conversation, or you're initiating conversation with them. And then we've got something that sits in the middle of that called natural language processing. And effectively, that's the engine that ingests what the person is typing, understands what it means, and then goes off and finds the right response. It's effectively how it enables it to talk to you like a human. Alongside that, then you've also got the bot logic. We'll come on to a little bit of that later on, but effectively, what do we do with this user now that we know what it's asking? We've got machine learning in there potentially. So what's the right or wrong answer based on what's happened previously? And then there's a whole bunch of other things we can do with these chatbots. So as we get more advanced, we might be looking at API and data in. We might be looking at going off and finding product recommendations from data lakes, passing off to a human support agent, and so on. The important one down here is information sources, because that's ultimately what's driving the information that's being provided back to the user. And I'll talk a bit more about information sources, but this is the flow. This is how it all works under the hood. And it will differ depending on the kind of product you're using and the complexity of application that you want to build. Something we're probably all familiar with is a simple conversation builder. This is, I think, from LivePerson, the screenshot I've got here. So a simple scenario where someone comes onto the bot, they want to return a product. We take it through some predefined interactions. Did you buy the last 30 days? Yes, I did. Okay, here's the link to our return page. Something we probably, most of us have had experience with, this kind of Q&A style bot. This is at the most basic ends, and this is relatively simple to build. There's, again, a whole load of companies that can provide you this at low cost. So very simple, straightforward, highly controllable, and the ability to hand off when things get more complex. On the other end of the scale, there's a huge amount of possibilities with AI, GenAI chatbots now. So those basic Q&A scenarios I just outlined, those guided product recommendations based on fixed data. So, for example, I want to book a flight. I don't necessarily know where I want to go, but I've got a certain date in mind, I've got a certain price level, and I've got a certain number of people. I can feed that into the AI chatbot, and it can go off, examine the data, the product data that it's got around the holidays that are in stock, and it can come back and recommend based on that criteria. So not that different to a website, advanced search, but you're doing it from within a bot. But effectively, it's searching product data based on your query. We can plug it into a data lake and we can get AI generated recommendations. So again, using that price, number of people, dates, criteria, we can go and find what the most successful searches and purchases based on those criteria that other people or lookalike audiences have bought previously. We could even have logins. So if someone wants to find their booking, if we maintain the example of a holiday, get access to their tickets or directions to the airport, whatever it might be, we can integrate with customer platforms like CRM to retrieve that data and serve it within the app. Another great use case for AI chatbots is multilingual capability. So where perhaps your website might not be multilingual at the moment, or where you've got, I don't know, people who might find it more comfortable interacting with you in a different language. Some of the AI bots out there have multilingual capability, so they can insert questions in French or German or whatever, and then get a response back in the same language. You can also hand off to ChatGPT. So let's say I've bought my holiday tickets. I might want to ask how I get to Manchester Airport from London or whatever I'm doing. Now, if the bot can't answer that on the data sets that it has, then it can hand off to something like ChatGPT for more generic inquiries or queries. Now, that presents some danger because you start to lose control. There are mitigation methods you can take to prevent some of that, but that's when it starts to go out of your sphere and into the wider world. You can obviously hand off to a live agent. You could even initiate a voice call. Interestingly, I actually had a scenario not so long ago where I was called by an insurance company about my house insurance, and I spent about 2 minutes on the phone to this company before I realized I was talking to an AI bot. Primarily because it started asking me the same question again and again, but it was so convincing. But again, these sorts of actions and flows can be initiated from the interactions within the bot. You can even do an entire purchase. So you can even pay for your holiday in this instance. You could enter your card details, you could check out. So you're not even touching the website page, you're doing it entirely through the bot. Again, this comes with certain data processing considerations I'll come on to. And then reporting, there's significantly different levels of reporting available, but looking at interactions, number of people who are using the bots, what they're talking about, what they're asking, where they're seeing friction, and so on. So the world is almost your oyster, is what I'm getting to here. So when you've got this, go from a Q&A bot right the way through to this full purchase journey, you can see how the possibilities are extensive, but also they get fairly complex as well. And I mentioned reporting briefly. I mentioned reporting, no surprise, I'm sure that you can analyze how many people are using the bot. But the thing to consider is that these bots also ingest an awful lot of information. So every conversation could potentially be logged. That's important when it comes to data protection, because you might be capturing things that you didn't necessarily realize you were capturing. Again, I'll come on to that in a second. So where do we start? What's our data source? Now, a lot of people might think that for an AI chatbot, it merely scrapes your website or an FAQ section or something like that. It's rarely as simple as that. And actually, the simplest bots just use documents. So if we look at our core chatbot platform, the thing that's powering all this, we've got that large language model, which is the thing that effectively understands what you're saying and gives you a human-like response. But where it's getting its data from can vary, and it could be a combination of places, or it could be one or more or whatever. So we mentioned briefly about logging in. So one of your data sources might be CRM. So find my purchase history, for example. It could be from the website, and you can scrape websites. It's not very reliable, and it depends on how your data on the website is structured. Sometimes the simplest way to do it is to provide it with a feed through an API from the content management system or whatever you're using through to the chatbot in a structured way that it can understand. There could be other databases. It could be a product database that you want to search directly if someone's asking about particular products. It could be a data lake if you're making, perhaps if you're delivering AI within a data lake to find things like lookalike audiences, best product for this person. Could be those sort of applications. It could just be a simple Word document. And we created a support chatbot actually a few weeks ago for a client, and it literally just used a stack of their Word documents that it could just search through. They could ask it a question such as, how do I add a banner to my homepage, and it could provide the answer in a human format. And finally, it could be a support database, and things like LivePerson, other tools like that can use, for example, common questions. If you have common questions that customers are asking, it can search the database for similar questions and try and provide the best response it feels is appropriate for that scenario. Those ones at the bottom are probably the two simplest. The support database one, you tend to find platforms, the all-in-one platforms will provide some AI functionality like that out of the box. If you don't have that, then probably documents is your best starting place. So literally just compiling a list of Q&As or commonly asked questions, FAQs, that sort of information into a Word document, the kind of thing that, you don't mind people self-servicing online. That's often the simplest way to start. It's really quick. You can get it up and running really, really swiftly. The second thing to think about is your data risk appetite. And this can be a bit of a gotcha for a lot of businesses, especially if you're heavily regulated. So there's a lot of data that these platforms could be processing. So obviously, conversation queries, you would expect in most platforms to be able to review conversations that have happened, to see what things people are asking about, whether it's successful, whether there were, complaints or angry points or friction points. But during those conversations, you might actually be inadvertently collecting a whole heap of data that you don't necessarily want to be collecting, or that the platform isn't authorized for. So, name, email address, phone numbers, that kind of thing. If you're purchasing an app, you could be processing card data, which is a big red PCI flag. So these things need to be considered. There are ways around it, but questions you need to be thinking about are, what data do we need to service the use case that we're trying to build out? So if we don't need to collect names and email addresses, then we need to think about how we hash that data and prevent it from being transmitted or stored in the cloud or the server architecture that the chatbot's hosted on. On that point, does it need to be on cloud, on-prem, or a hybrid approach? And this will depend on your data policies. So where does user data need to be stored? How secure does it need to be in terms of who can access it, for example? What location does it need to be stored in as well? So often things need to be stored within the EU. In Germany, it might need to be stored in Germany. So you just got to be careful about thinking about where this thing is hosted and where it's storing data. Obviously, who has access to it, because you don't necessarily want people to be looking at customer data and accessing things like email addresses and phone numbers if they're not authorized. So the data question is one you need to address up front, and it might limit what you can do, or you might need to take mitigation measures to make sure that it's not going to be a barrier. But that's definitely a gotcha, a starting point before you start delivering something, because you don't want to find out the day before you launch that you're capturing data that you can't store or process. The other thing to think about is brand. So how do we control how our bot is communicating with our customers? You'll probably have ways of writing within a business, or the way you market. You have a tone of voice that you want to present to customers, and you want to reflect that within the bot as well. And this all comes down to control. And you hear a lot about AI guardrails, and that can mean many things to many people. But from a brand point of view, guardrails are key, because you want to control your bot. You don't want it to start swearing at customers or recommending competitors or doing something else that's going to cause you problems. So you can control tone of voice. A lot of platforms will allow you to select, formal, informal, friendly, whatever it might be. You can put parameters around that and prompts that will deliver a tone of voice that's perhaps more suited to your brand. Control of your data. Now, this is important because if you're providing a Word document and that's the only thing the AI chatbot is allowed to read, that's really simple, because it can only ever give answers from data that you've provided to it. The same with product data or anything else that you control. The minute you start handing off to the wider chat GPT or other services, those ecosystems, that you start to lose control. You can create things like watch bots that will prevent or give more context to the bot before it provides an answer. But if you're day one thinking about launching one of these, I would need to be keeping very, very tight control of what the chatbot is actually got access to in order to answer questions, so it doesn't go rogue and start writing poems about you. Look at where the handoff points are. You don't want angry customers, frustrated customers. You can set the points at which a customer is handed off to a real person or to an inquiry form or an email address or phone number, just to stop people getting into a sort of endless loop of not being able to answer the question. And also compliance guardrails. So what can or cannot we talk about within the chatbot? If I'm a financial services firm, I might be prevented from making specific recommendations, for example, about specific products. So again, we need to think about how we put parameters around these. So these guardrails are really, really important. And the other one is how much time and budget can we allocate? So to give you a couple of fairly high level examples, to get an Azure OpenAI chatbot up and running is really, really simple. We did one the other week, again, for our client, for a support bot. It took virtually no time at all. The only sort of real ongoing cost is the hosting, because it does require processing power. And if you go for the lower tiers, you can sometimes run into speed issues. So, this is a sort of basic pricing model. So this is really quick and simple. This assumes you spend a day creating a Word document that's going to serve this bot. Setup is really, really simple, and it's your ongoing cost. So if you want to test something, this is a really good way of starting to go about that. If you want to get more advanced, then it becomes a much bigger piece of work. So we've got to talk about hosting, design, build content, which systems are we going to integrate with, how are we supporting this, who's supporting it, what's the governance around who can use it, how we get data into it and who can look at data inside it, and what's the reporting that we need and we want to get out of it. Now, this cost can be, almost like how long is a piece of string. We recently looked at a pilot where to get a sort of basic bot up and running, hosted in a hybrid scenario, a bit of design, bit of builds, bit of integration, you're talking about 35,000 for a 3, 4, 5 month pilot. It could be £50,000 for the year, including licensing. And if you get into big boy world, then it's, you could be spending an absolute fortune. So you want to make sure you're approaching it from the right direction, that you've tested it, that you're sure that the scenarios you're spending money on are actually going to generate value for the business. But this is when I went back to the art of the possible and what you can do within these, you can see that it's almost like a website build project. This kind of scenario is not something you just build out in a week and hope it's gonna work and solve all your problems. So where do you start? And I've put together some structure. This is a little bit wordy, but I thought it might be useful. If you want to screenshot it, please do. If you want us to send you this afterwards, we can do that as well. But my primary advice would be don't run before you can walk. There is a process, as you can probably see from the things I've been talking about today. There's a lot to consider. And if you try and do too much at once, you're going to miss something or you're not going to think it through properly. So my advice would be try and test something, pilot something, maybe just on one area of the site in the first instance, and then start to build out from there. So if we're talking about the steps, the first thing I would be looking to do is to set up a working group. So marketing might be leading this initiative, but it's potentially going to involve other people from around the business. It could involve sales teams, customer support teams, IT, governance, and so on. So we need to start by defining what the problem is we're trying to solve and for who. So if it's a customer support scenario or a customer booking a holiday scenario or someone coming to a legal website looking for, I don't know, support around conveyancing or whatever it might be, we need to define what it is we're trying to do for these people. Who are they? What problems are they currently having? Where are we excessively serving them with real people at the moment where it could be automated? We also at this point need to be thinking about then which other teams should be involved in this process. So if it's a customer support bot, then obviously customer support it needs to be involved. Could be content creation we need from them. It could be sign off and so on. So it's really a one-person job, this. And what content needs to support it? That content will need to sit somewhere. If it's being written into a Word document or an FAQ type style, then it may be something that we just produce ourselves. If it's sensitive data, compliance type data, regulated data, we might need it to be signed off. If we are integrating with the CRM to let people log into their account, or if we are putting product recommendations, we need to think about where those integrations are going to come from, who needs to be involved in building those, how long it's going to take, what barriers and risks there might be. So where does that content live? And if it doesn't exist, then who needs to create it? What integration points do we need? Probably minimal if we can at day one, but we will need to build them out over time. So start thinking about planning ahead as to what might be useful in the future. And those questions about what is our data and brand risk appetite? So what are our policies around data processing? Who can access it? When it comes to brands, what kind of tone of voice do we want to present? Is it going to be a friendly, higher type chatbot? Or does it need to be quite formal because that's the kind of business we are, it's what our customers expect? And then how much time and budget can we allocate? And I've given you a couple of broad ranges just now, but it is going to take time. And whether you're using an agency, whether you're doing it yourselves, there is going to be time. There'll be money involved in some shape or form, even if it's just hosting. So think about what your parameters are for that. Once you've done that, then you can start looking at what technology you use. So that can be based on a heap of decisions, and I could probably spend a full hour just talking about this, but at a high level, think about whether if you're running a pilot, you're probably going to want to test this maybe on one part of the site. You might want to just see how people are using it, get an idea for the interactions you're getting. Well, you might want to bin that afterwards, and you might say, right, now we know how our customers are using it. We want to actually invest in a technology platform that sits over AI and do it properly. So make a decision about whether you're testing or whether you've got the confidence to do something more from day one. And like I said, what are we prepared to throw away? How much of this investment in this pilot can we bin if we decide we're going to actually buy in technology afterwards? Need to think about where it's going to be hosted. Not every platform will let you host outside of the cloud. So if you need on-prem or hybrid infrastructure because of where data needs to be processed, that could limit your technology decisions. So you need to understand, again, the parameters around that. And what other technology dependencies do we have? So if we want to retrieve data from data lakes or CRMs or integrate with a card payment processing platform, we need to understand if we can do that with the technologies we're looking at, and also whether those other platforms can integrate in the way we need them to. So we need to understand that, and again, that involves people and teams and potentially agencies. And then we can decide which platform is best suited to our needs, either for a pilot or for a longer term investment. And when we're looking at a pilot, we're looking at potentially doing it on one channel, one section of the site, and just limiting the audience that are seeing our chatbot so that we can keep an eye on it, make sure it's not doing anything we don't want it to do, that it's serving customers as we want to in the way that they expect from our brand. So doing it in quite a controlled way. Not everybody does this, but if you've got the traffic to support it, it's probably not a bad idea to test it before you start rolling out further. I talked earlier about reporting, so you can monitor initial usage, so you can have a look at the summaries of chats that are taking place. You can see where people are getting stuck or frustrated or angry, or even trying to game your chatbot. And that happens a lot. People trying to do it, just for a bit of fun, and they think it'd be funny to post it online. You can see potentially where there are things that you need to address to stop that happening. So what kind of stupid questions are you getting? The other thing to look at is customer feedback. So obviously at the end of a lot of these bot conversations, you are asked for feedback and you can provide that. And then you can review that as a team and understand what customers really think about it before you invest further. The other thing to look at is, I mentioned handoff to real people earlier. Those frustration points are really important because if you can't address them with content, then the next best action is probably going to be to direct them to a contact form, phone number, email, something like that. So you'll be able to see that from the reporting and from the chat logs where that's happening, and also from the feedback. Then we can start to adapt our content. So if we're getting a lot of questions about things that we can't currently provision with our data, we can either update that data, or we can find out where the data lives and see if we want to integrate it into the platform or provide it in another way. And we might want to adjust the flows, the responses, or something, or whatever else we want to do as part of our pilot to then see how that's then affecting customer behavior. And what's really important then is once we've got sufficient data, is to try to close it off and do a proper regroup. It may be that you find that the bot is not performing how you want it to. You might find that there's the risk of keeping it online is not worth the hassle. So you need to make a decision then about what you do with it, and it's probably going to be taken offline. But once you've got sufficient data and you understand how it's performing, then it's really important to regroup at that point. So with our all party working group, we want to look at doing a retrospective. So we want to look at how we think it went, what went well, what didn't go so well, what we can improve. Reviewing that data, the customer feedback, but also the team feedback. So how easy was it to set up? How much time are we going to need in future to optimize this thing? How's it being used by customers? And then assess what we do as part of the next phase. So a lot to think about there. Again, I can provide these steps to you as part of a handout if you're interested in seeing them. So to summarize, as I said at the beginning, these are things that I wish I'd known a few years ago, and I hope it's been useful for you as well. A lot to consider, a lot of gotchas there that hopefully you can avoid now you've seen this. But just to quickly summarize what I've spoken about, GenAI is not perfect. Like I said, this wider ecosystem where you start to lose control of how these bots are collecting and transmitting information, it can be a bit of a minefield. So think about how you're controlling your data, knowing your guardrails. I've spoken at length about this, but where does data sit? How's your brand going to be communicated, and so on. Setting those from the beginning. Don't be overawed by the tech. There's a lot out there. A lot of it looks quite similar. But by going through a proper requirements process, it will help you narrow down your criteria for what the technology needs to be. So from hundreds to a handful shouldn't take you too much effort, as long as you know what you're going to be using this thing for and what the guardrails and parameters are going to be. Plan properly. So treat it as a project. Don't treat it as something you're doing on the side, because again, as I said earlier, you'll forget stuff, you'll miss things, you'll launch something, and then your data person will be hitting you over the head saying, why the hell are we collecting email addresses on this thing? So treat it as a project. And if you've got the capacity to do it, test fast, learn fast. Look at piloting if you can, see how people are using it, and then look to iterate from there. And I think we are at 40 minutes. We aren't doing questions as part of this one just because of time, but as Mario said at the beginning, we can, if you want to have a chat with us, if you want to understand a bit more about how we've done this previously, about other things to consider, or just to get a sort of honest view of what you're trying to achieve, give us a shout. If you want a demo of something like Azure OpenAI, we can show you how that's constructed and how easy it is to set up. So if you're looking at doing a pilot, or if you just want to chat, just email us. I think you've probably got our contact details already. You can follow us also on LinkedIn using the QR code on the screen as well. And that is everything I wanted to cover on this session.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Dee, for taking us through today's subject. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today and taking the time out of your busy days to watch today's webinar. And hopefully we'll see you on a session in the future. So it leaves me to say thank you and goodbye.